What's up, y'all? You're listening to the My Aggie Nation podcast. I'm Alex Miller, joined always by Robert Cessna. Cease, it's back on the road this weekend for the Aggies. They're facing the Auburn Tigers at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Jordan, apparently, is the correct pronunciation.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
The more you know.
You got to pronounce that, Jordan. Come on.
Kind of like Louisville, right? Not Louisville or Louisville. It's
Well,
Louisville.
Everybody mispronounce my name. I'm really Robert.
All jokes aside, this is a big game for the Aggies, and last time out on the road, it wasn't too favorable when the Aggies were in a big game at night against a conference foe.
Well, the Aggies are starting to feel good about themselves, and rightfully so. You win at Florida, you win at Mississippi State. Those places have been tough, for a lot of people. Not for A&M and Florida, but, Mississippi State's been tough. And that old adage, anytime you go in the road in the SEC, and we're hearing a lot of that this week because of the college football playoff, which is true, and A&M had a favorable schedule, took advantage of it. This is still a favorable schedule, and they have to take advantage of it. But as I've delved into Auburn, I've said several times, this is a bad team. This is a bad record team. They actually have the stats of a 6-4 team, and they're 4-6. And you go, well, what does 6-4 mean? 6-4 means A&M better come ready to play, or else they'll lose the ball game. And that's the bottom line, because Auburn, they're not playing for anything, but sometimes those are dangerous teams.
Yeah, it's going to be really hard for Auburn to make a bowl game, given they have to play A&M and Alabama. I feel like it'd be hard for them to win both. I'm sure they could win both, but it'd be hard to do both. They're not very good in Tuscaloosa. But that's a side conversation for another time or another podcast. But it's interesting how Auburn, like you said, like the stats are there, but the record's not, because it just seems like Auburn finds dumb ways to lose games that they have no business losing.
Yes, and that's why they're dangerous, because if they don't make those stupid mistakes, they'll win. And sometimes when you're playing for nothing, you kind of play at ease. I was amazed when I look back on Saturday night's game when A&M played New Mexico State. New Mexico State came in there with nothing to play for at 2-7. They have no motion penalties in front of 105,000 people. They only had 3 hold penalties. They didn't really do anything stupid, because to me they had nothing to play for. They just had some fun. And you say, I always like when people go, oh man, Auburn needs to get to be bowl eligible to go to the Mayo Bowl or go to the Texas Bowl. No, they'll make their season if they beat A&M and Auburn. So these are their bowl games. So that's why they will be a little bit jacked up, and it's going to be up to A&M to get that jacking out of them, so to speak, and bring them back to earth, because they let them stay in it. Then they're going to say, hey, we can win this game. And, A&M traditionally does pretty good on the first script of plays. We saw that again against New Mexico State. If you jump on a team like this early, you've got a chance to make it a lot easier. It's better than they were there. That fiasco 2 years ago, oh my gosh, I've never had a root canal, but it's got to be somewhat like that.
That might have been one of the worst football games I've ever watched.
Oh.
It was also freezing cold that day in Auburn.
And you're outside. We're outside press box.
And we were outside, yes. To me, this one kind of comes down to which team makes less dumb mistakes, because Auburn has been turnover prone all season. We've seen that throughout their games. Peyton Thorne had a good game last week, although they played Louisiana Monroe. So
it's not a bad average team.
It's not a bad team, but it's Louisiana Monroe.
It's Louisiana Monroe.
It was not LSU. And then on the flip side, A&M won convincingly and decisively last week, but it just seemed like the Aggies did little things that really hindered them from having a 60-3 win instead of what they had in 38-3, with a couple turnovers, a couple costly penalties that forced them into punting situations. Just little things here and there, kind of boneheaded things that you go, why is A&M doing this against a team like New Mexico State?
Well, also, the good and bad of Marcel Reed is, and we saw it last week, he can miss guys open by 20 yards, just miss them really bad, a la Haynes King or Zach Calzada used to drive fans. And you can see how that takes something out of the team when a guy's wide open and you miss him. But, Reed has the ability to throw a ball 60 yards on a dime. He has the ability to run 60 yards, so you got to take the good with the bad. But on the road, you've got to limit those plays where the team gets disgusted a little bit. And I'll be interested to see how he plays this week because it's a big game for him on the road. I'm interested to see if Basantis comes back because I think that offensive line has a little bit of issues when he's not in there. And you think now that they're missing, Moss as well, going on the road, so there's a lot of things I want to see.
Shanahan has been kind of a culprit of a lot of penalties in place of Basantis this year. And, getting him back would be a huge bonus for the Aggies going into this final stretch. But based on kind of what we know about what Basantis is dealing with, of course, you probably don't want to throw him back out there unless he's 100% because it might be an injury that can be re-aggravated pretty easily if you step funny or whatnot. Yeah,
and let's be honest, the biggest game of the week I get here is this week, but of course then you want to look ahead. You want to be fully healthy for Texas. When there, you're going to be in the college football playoff hosting, so you got to be careful. And
they got to play the SEC championship first, likely against Alabama.
And A&M seems like is in this mode where they lose a player every week. They lost Allen last week, and you go look at his stats, and they aren't that great. But he's the third leading receiver on the team. That's a little bit of the problem that they have. And so now you lost one of your wide receivers. You lost two of your running backs because remember they came in. A lot of us thought Owens might be the stud. And so, they're out of offensive linemen. They are not that deep. Most teams aren't.
On the plus side, something that really shone through in that New Mexico State game was the tight end play. Theo Melon-Ostrom had over 100 yards. Trey Watson had several catches. And so, whereas A&M receiver has been problematic for most of the season, does A&M have a receiver that has over 500 yards this season? Now, granted, I know they've spread the ball out a lot. It's not like they have just a four-man rotation and that's it. A lot of different guys have had touches, but, A&M has not had a guy just, totally emerge and take over throughout the season, and the tight ends got a little more implemented into the game last week.
But I'm not even going to put that on my meter, so to speak, because if I'm not mistaken, he had two big catches in the Florida game and had a touchdown. Everybody goes, Alstrom's doing good. I think Allen had the long touchdown pass as well.
Yep.
And then neither one of them have really done big things since then. So that's the problem with A&M's passing game. When you start looking, Noah Thomas comes out some kind of flower. He comes out once every 3 games, and he goes in an orchid, goes in hibernation. So you can't really count on anything in that passing game, and that's kind of dangerous when we're this late in the season and you're thinking okay, if A&M's got to have a wide receiver step up Saturday in Auburn, who's it going to be? And you'd probably
Maybe it's Moose Muhammad.
Maybe it's Moose. You might get different answers.
He's been due a big game. He normally has a big game.
But he won't have his gloves. They won't let him go out on if it's Auburn.
Hey, he's been wearing the sleeves all season. Have you not noticed this? I'm going to have to take a picture of Moose with the sleeves.
Bostic, he comes out of the woodwork. They need somebody. They're probably going to need to, because Auburn actually has a few good receivers. And once again, you don't want to compare apples with oranges, but it is funny. Both teams run the ball. Both teams have quarterbacks that waiting to see what happens. Thorne can be really good, and he can be really bad because he was bad last year against A&M too. So A&M's hoping for a bad Thorne.
Yeah, one thing I think will be indicative of the outcome of the game is which Peyton Thorne actually shows up. If it's the Peyton Thorne of last week, A&M better watch out and not get upset because that's a pretty good Peyton Thorne. If it's the Peyton Thorne that showed up against Oklahoma and got benched for Hank Brown, Auburn's going to be in trouble, and A&M probably by the third quarter can look ahead at that Texas game going, man, the SEC championship game is in sight.
Well, man, I was trying to think about that. They did jump on Florida a second time, and then they finally put them ahead in the third quarter and put them away, so to speak. Bad interception that time. I don't know if I think that A&M can put away a team on the road right now the way they are. They would be, don't get me, it'd be great. But, I I was kind of surprised it was 2.5. I always try to guess what the point spread is.
Vegas knows, man.
And I'm thinking like, okay, maybe A&M by 5. And I'm thinking, man, 2.5 is like nothing. 2.5 is like blow your nose and the other team's winning. I mean, once I looked at Auburn, I think if Hunter, for whatever reason, A&M's run defense has been spotty at times. I mean, they give 140 yards to McNeese. Now the game was over, but you're still playing good defense, and they weren't doing it. And particularly how bad South Carolina ran the ball. And I give those New Mexico State guys credit. They were bouncing off tackles early. And we know Hunter's at least that good, if not better. So this is why you and I are going to the game. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns, but yet, man, so much online.
Yeah, A&M's run defense been a little up and down. Containing the edge, not letting guys get to the edge is going to be a big deal. Thorne is not a runner. We know that about him. That plays into A&M's favor. They're not going to have to face another Lenoris Sellers in this game. But Jarquez Hunter, he at times has gone off.
He's good.
I know a lot of his yardage this season came in one particular game against Kentucky, and that has allowed him to be second in the SEC. But can A&M hold the edge? Because, like you said, last week, McGowan, early in the game, got a couple of big runs when he got to the outside, and they were able to seal those blockers. A&M gets really good penetration, but sometimes it seems like those ends over-pursue.
One guy's out the lunch.
They're right there. They over-pursue, though. Guy gets away, and he gets a 20-yard run. A&M can't allow that to happen against Auburn and let the home crowd get into it a little bit on offense.
Let's not forget the DJ Durkin factor. I mean, you got a former A&M defensive coordinator. He's going to be jacked up for this. I want to see A&M run the hideout play because DJ Durkin's defense is very famous for not seeing the hideout play.
Going to see a defensive end covering Terry Bussey and Jabri Barber out there on the slot?
That's what A&M's hoping. Klein's saying, man, go ahead and put Scortan or somebody, whatever.
Scorton.
Yeah, him too, yeah. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. A&M's smarter than that. But, hey, in all kidding aside, Durkin is a good defensive coordinator. He's proven it. I thought, like last year, he was both times he's jacked up to play Ole Miss. He's going to be jacked up to play A&M, and as well he should be. And, I think Freeze is one of these characters. I always thought he's been at his best a lot of times against A&M when he was at Auburn. And last year,
Ole Miss.
You're right, Ole Miss. When he was at Ole Miss, I thought he can really call a good game. And a guy like that, if you're A&M, I think they got to scare you because when he gets in that groove of calling plays, he really does well. So you got Bateman and Elko / going against Freeze. I think that's a great matchup.
Wasn't his last season the one where Shea Patterson came to Kyle Field and won the game?
Might not have been his last, but it was when they burnt the red shirt, and A&M just could not guard at all. And then they went and lost the next game anyway. They didn't get to be bowl eligible. But once again, as Freeze does, I think if you're A&M, you got to be glad that he didn't have an extra week to prepare for. I think. South Carolina, that was huge. I thought South Carolina just had a lot of great stuff drawn up and really was able to execute it with that two-man game. But I will be interested to see what Freeze, how he attacks A&M.
One big plus for the Aggies is that Amari Daniels, he only had like 5 carries last week, had a nice game, and they were able to kind of put him on bubble wrap, hide him on the sidelines, not risk injury. And that's a big thing for A&M because they cannot afford another loss at running back, particularly with what we've seen, what the Aggies are working with behind Amari Daniels.
Well, I think if you're A&M, you're a little concerned because E.J. Smith, he's come in and talked to us once, fine, outstanding young man. I thought he just had an average outing against New Mexico State, which is not very good. I don't think that bodes very well, and I think that's why they had Daniels on wrap as well. It would have to be disheartening for A&M. Connor Wegman looked lost, a deer in the headlights when he came on. I know it's tough when you've been the starter and you've been the guy to go to a backup role, but he's a twisted ankle from getting in there and possibly the whole season being on the line. So if you're A&M, you got to be a little bit worried about that. You got a running quarterback, and you never know when something's going to happen. Suddenly, if you got Wegman in there, suddenly starting. If you have Smith in there, something happens to Daniels. Wow, that shows you how just fragile things can be, because you love where A&M's at when everybody's there, but these games, and to go on the road, all that. Wow.
Is this the part of the press conference where Elko taps the side of the podium and knocks on the wood?
You see, that's why I always bring my own wood with me. It's a lot easier on me. I just do like that. Did Cease write something wrong again? Oh, there we go.
Well, Cease, we'll close with this. What does A&M need to do to win, and how confident are you in the Aggies' ability to come away with the victory to set up what would be the biggest A&M Texas game that any of us have known?
A&M has done a pretty good job of taking care of business. They found a way. You just can't say, Reed might have a big game, the defense might have a big game. They have enough variables that can have big games. Unfortunately, none of them have had consistency. So you just don't know who's going to step up. You don't know if, Marcel Reed's going to have 350 yards total offense. That would do it. We don't know if A&M's going to come out and have 6 sacks against Thorne. That will do it. A&M's defense does not force a lot of turnovers a lot of times. I mean, they had that good stretch there around the Arkansas game or whatever. They had all those interceptions, but they just haven't. They had 0 turnovers last week against New Mexico State, which came in with 20, one of the most prone Division I teams for having turnovers. In front of 105,000 people, no turnovers. I think A&M's going to have to get a couple turnovers in Auburn.
Well, to be fair, the New Mexico State quarterbacks were very inaccurate, and I don't even know if they could have thrown it to the A&M defenders.
But they had to catch those snaps. Come on, I was impressed.
Oh,
they were so bad.
Man, I felt bad for them at times. Just, holy cow.
I see games like that, and I go, I can still play D1 for some people.
That's debatable. Hey, be praying for us that we get to Atlanta in one piece with what's going on with Spirit Airlines. But
I got Spirit. How about you?
Assuming we do get there, possibly by car, we'll be there at Auburn, Jordan Hare Stadium.
Robert says Jordan.
Jake Weiss says Jordan, I think.
Well, then I know it's wrong.
Oh, man.
He spent 8 years in Auburn, and that's all he came out of it with. How to pronounce the stadium? Okay, it's not bad.
It's not bad, Jake. All right, hey, be sure to check theeagle.com for all of our coverage of A&M's game against Auburn. We'll be back next week on the My Aggie Nation podcast.